Picture a man standing alone in a scorched wilderness, weakened by 40 days of hunger, facing an enemy that offers him the entire world. His lips are cracked, his body is trembling, and in that moment of total vulnerability, a voice arrives with proposition that could end all his suffering in an instant. This is the story of Jesus in the desert, but seen through a lens most people overlook. Not merely a battle against an external tempter, but a confrontation with the deepest hungers of the human soul itself. What if Jesus' greatest battle with the devil was not simply a fight against some outside enemy lurking in the shadows? What if it was something far more intimate, far more unsettling? A battle against everything within humanity that craves power, that clings to pride, that hungers for control, and that longs to glorify itself above all else. Think about what actually happened out there. The devil offered Jesus power over all the kingdoms of the world. Every throne, every crown, every empire that had ever risen or would ever rise. And yet Jesus refused. He turned away from absolute power and chose instead the far harder road, the road of humility, of obedience, of sacrifice, of surrender. Who does that? Who walks away from the entire world when it is placed in the palm of their hand? This is the question that will follow us through everything we explore today. What did Jesus understand about the ego that most people still struggle to grasp, even now, 2,000 years later? If you're fascinated by the hidden teachings of Jesus, by ancient Christianity, by the mysteries buried within Scripture, and by the symbols and deeper meaning behind the words attributed to Christ, subscribe to the channel. In this video, we're going to go deeper than the familiar stories to examine 10 of the most difficult and challenging lessons of Jesus, and to separate historical evidence from later interpretation and speculation. Because this isn't about sensationalizing a sacred story. It isn't about turning faith into spectacle. Over the next 25 minutes, we're going to walk carefully through the biblical accounts of the temptation and uncover 10 things you may never have noticed about how Jesus overcame the ego, temptation, and the devil. 10 quiet revelations hidden inside a story you may think you already know by heart, and here is the heart of what we'll discover. Jesus' triumph in the wilderness can be read on 2 levels at once. On one level, it is a dramatic spiritual confrontation, a clash between the Son of God and the great adversary. But on another level, it is something profoundly personal and universal. It is a lesson about overcoming the ego. Because when you look closely at each temptation, you begin to see that every single one targets a fundamental human desire. The desire to prove yourself, to show the world exactly who you are. The desire for immediate gratification, to satisfy the hunger the moment it appears. The desire for power, to hold authority over others. The desire to be recognized, to be seen, to be admired. The desire to control outcomes, to bend reality to your will. And beneath all of them, the oldest desire of all, the desire to place the self at the very center of everything. These are not ancient temptations that died in the desert. They are the same hungers that whisper to us every single day. And that is what makes this story so haunting and so relevant. The wilderness Jesus walked into was real, but it is also a mirror. When we watch him face the tempter, we are, in a strange way, watching ourselves face the quietest and most persistent enemy any of us will ever know. So the real question becomes this: what happens when a person refuses to let the ego define their identity, their desires, and their actions? What kind of freedom is possible when you stop obeying every craving, simply because it exists within you? But to understand how Jesus answered these temptations, we first have to walk with him into the wilderness itself. We have to fell the silence, the hunger, the isolation, because that is where the real battle began. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it, a vast expanse of nothing, sand and stone stretching in every direction, broken only by the shimmer of heat rising from the ground. This is the wilderness of Judea, and it is here that Jesus walked alone for 40 days and 40 nights. There are no crowds here, no disciples, no comforting voice to break the stillness. There is only the wind, the sun, and a silence so complete that it presses against the ears like a physical weight. 40 days without food. Try to imagine what that does to a body. The strength that once filled the limbs slowly drains away. Hunger stops being a feeling and becomes a constant, gnawing presence, a hollow ache that never rests. The mind grows foggy, the body trembles. Every step across that unforgiving landscape demands effort that a well-fed person could never understand. This is not a peaceful retreat. This is depletion. This is a man brought to the very edge of physical endurance. And there is more than hunger out here. There is isolation, the kind of solitude that most of us spend our entire lives trying to avoid. No conversation to distract the thoughts, no task to fill the hours, no familiar face to remind you of who you are, just and the raw truth of your own existence stretched out before you in the endless quiet. There is uncertainty about what comes next, and the total absence of comfort in any form. No soft place to rest, no shelter from the burning day or the cold, indifferent night. But here is what we must understand. This wilderness was never only a place on a map. It is a mirror held up to the human soul. Because every one of us knows a wilderness of our own. It is that internal landscape where the noise of daily life finally falls away, and we are left alone with what truly lives inside us. Strip away the distractions, the entertainment, the endless busyness we use to avoid ourselves, and what remains? The wilderness is the place where the surface is peeled back, and what lies beneath is finally exposed, and what lies beneath is a battlefield. Because solitude and deprivation do something strange to a person. They remove every mask. Out here, you cannot perform for anyone. You cannot hide behind status or possessions or the approval of others. You met the raw truth of what you actually want and the raw truth of who you actually are. And in that meeting, a confrontation begins. It is impulse against discipline, the desperate urge to satisfy every craving against the quiet strength to wait. It is pride against humility, the demand to be sen against the willingness to be small. It is control against surrender, the need to grip every outcome tightly against the courage to let go. And beneath it all, it is ego against spiritual purpose, the self-demanding to sit on the throne against a caling that asks the self to step aside. This is why the wilderness matters so deeply. It is not a background detail in the story. It is the arena. It is the stage on which the deepest human conflict plays out. And notice the timing of what is about to happen. The tempter does not arrive on a full stomach. He does not come when Jesus is rested, surrounded by support, standing at the height of his strength. No, he waits. He waits until the body is weak, until the hunger is unbearable, until the isolation has done its slow and grinding work. Temptation almost always arrives precisely when we are at our most vulnerable, when our defenses are lowest and our resistance is thin. There is something honest and unsettling about that. We like to imagine that our greatest tests will come when we are ready for them. But that is rarely how it works. The hardest choices tend to find us in our weakest moments, when we are tired, hungry, lonely, and afraid. When saying no feels almost impossible, and that is exactly the condition Jesus was in as those 40 days drew to their close. Emptied out, stripped bare, utterly alone in the vast silence of the desert. It is in this stripped bare state, hungry and alone, that the tempter finally approaches with 3 offers that would test the very core of who Jesus was. The first offer comes cloaked in reason. If you are the Son of God, the tempter says, command these stones to become bread. On the surface, it seems almost innocent. Jesus is starving. His body is crying out for food. What could be wrong with satisfying a need so basic, so human, so undeniably real? And that is exactly what makes this temptation so subtle. It does not begin with something evil. It begins with something legitimate. Hunger is not a sin. The desire for bread is not corruption. The body was made to need. But notice what the tempter is really doing here. He is not simply offering food. He is inviting Jesus to let a legitimate need become the thing that defines him, the thing that dictates his identity and directs his choices. And this is the quiet lesson buried in the stones. Having a desire is not the problem. Allowing that desire to become your master is. The moment we let our appetites decide who we are, we hand over the reins of our lives to whatever we happen to be craving in the moment. Then comes the second offer, and it shifts the ground entirely. The tempter takes Jesus to the highest point of the temple and says, "Throw yourself down. If you are the Son of God, the angels will catch you." This is no longer about the body. This is about the ego. It is a dare, a challenge, a whisper that says, "Prove it. Show them who you are. Make them see." And here we brush against something painfully familiar. The ego is never satisfied with quiet certainty. It craves spectacle. It wants an audience. It wants the dramatic gesture, the undeniable display, the moment where everyone finally recognizes our importance. The endless hunger for validation lives in this temptation, the restless need to be seen, admired, and confirmed by the eyes of others. And then the third offer arrives, and it drops all pretense. The tempter shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in their glory and says, "All this I will give you, if you will bow down and worship me." Here is power in its rawest form: authority, status, domination, everything the ego secretly longs to possess. This is the temptation to control, to rule, to sit above others and command the world to bend. And it comes with a price that seems small in the moment, but costs everything. Just one act of surrender to the wrong master, and all of it could be his. 3 offers, 3 doorways into the same darkness. But who is the one standing at these doorways? Who is this tempter, this adversary in the wilderness? Within Christian theology, he is the devil, a spiritual enemy, real and personal, opposed to God and to everything good. He is the accuser, the deceiver, the one who seeks to pull creation away from its creator. That is the theological dimension, and we should not flatten it or explain it away. But the story invites us to see more than one layer at once. The temptations also function as a test of character, a trial that reveals what a person is truly made of when everything comfortable has been stripped away. And beneath that, there is something that speaks directly to the human condition in every age. There is the ego, that relentless drive to make the self the center of reality, to place our own desires, our own recognition, our own control above all else. Now here is an important distinction, and we must hold it carefully. The Bible does not literally equate the devil with the psychological ego. These are not the same thing, and pretending they are would do violence to the text. But the story can be read on more than one level, and when we read it closely, we find it revealing a conflict as old as humanity itself, the collision between self-centered desire and spiritual obedience, between what I want and what I am called to become. This is why the account still breathes with meaning. It spoke to ancient listeners standing in dusty synagogues, and it speaks just as sharply to modern minds shaped by psychology and self-awareness. And Jesus, weak and hungry and utterly alone, refused all 3 offers. He said no to the bread, no to the spectacle, no to the kingdoms. And within that threefold refusal lie 10 remarkable truths about his victory. Truths most people have never paused to notice. Let us begin with the first of these truths, and it starts where all hunger begins, in the body. The first temptation arrived at the weakest possible moment, 40 days without food. A body trembling on the edge of collapse, and the voice whispered something that seemed almost reasonable. "If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread." Notice how gentle the trap appears. There is nothing evil about being hungry. Hunger is not sin. The need for bread is not corruption. And yet, in that fragile hour, the temptation was never really about food. It was about identity. It was about who gets to decide who Jesus is. Would his hunger become thing that defined him? Would physical craving be allowed to overrule his deeper purpose? And here is the lesson, quiet but profound. Having a desire does not mean the desire should control you. You can feel hunger without letting hunger become your master. You can carry a longing without kneeling before it. Jesus felt the ache as sharply as any human being ever has, and still he refused to let it rule. The second temptation shifts the ground beneath our feet. The devil takes him to the pinnacle of the temple and says, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. Let everyone see the angels catch you." And suddenly, we are no longer dealing with the body. We are dealing with the ego, that restless part of us that hungers not for bread, but for recognition. The ego asks a question constantly, in 1,000 disguises. What can I do to make others see my importance? Prove yourself. Perform. Give them a spectacle they cannot ignore. But Jesus refuses to leap. He does not need a crowd gasping in wonder to know who he is. And that is the second truth. True identity does not require constant validation. The person who is secure in who they are does not need to keep proving it. Only the ego demands an audience for its worth. Then comes the third temptation, and it is the largest of all. The devil offers the kingdoms of the world, all their splendor, all their authority, laid out like a feast. Just bow and it is yours. Here the offer is power, raw and immediate and total. And Jesus refuses even this. Why? Because he understood something the world still forgets. Power without moral direction can become another form of slavery. The ego always wants control. It reaches for the levers, the thrones, the ability to command. But wisdom asks a deeper question. Not merely can I control this, but should I? Not merely how much power can I gather, but whether that power will free me or quietly chain me. Jesus saw the golden offer and recognized the hidden shackles beneath it. The fourth truth grows out of the third, and it touches the shape of a whole life. In each of these moments, the easier road was always available. Immediate satisfaction, instant relief, the quick reward within reach. Yet Jesus chose purpose over pleasure, remaining faithful to a mission that stretched far beyond the comfort of the moment. And this is something we feel in our own lives more than we like to admit. A meaningful life often requires resisting short-term rewards for the sake of a greater purpose. The things that matter most are rarely the things that satisfy us fastest. Jesus modeled a kind of patience that the modern world has almost forgotten, the willingness to say no to the small good in order to protect the greater one. And the fifth truth reveals something about how he fought at all. Notice that Jesus never argues with temptation emotionally. He does not rage, he does not panic, he does not spiral into fear or puff himself up with wounded pride. Each time he responds with scripture, with something steady and rooted beneath him. And that teaches us something we need in our own hardest hours. When emotions run high, principles matter even more. It is precisely when we are shaken, when hunger and fear and desire are screaming, that we most need something solid to stand upon. Jesus did not let the storm of feeling stir the ship. He anchored himself to truth and let the storm pass over him. These first 5 lessons reveal the pattern of his resistance, the quiet architecture of a soul that would not be moved. But the remaining 5 carry us deeper still, to the very heart of what his victory truly means. The 6th truth touches something painfully familiar to all of us. When the devil dared Jesus to throw himself from the temple, there was a hidden invitation buried inside it. It was a temptation to turn faith into a show, to make the sacred into a spectacle for watching eyes. Imagine the crowd below, the gasps, the awe, the proof written across every stunned face. The ego loves that moment. It craves the audience, the applause, the confirmation that it is being seen. But Jesus turned away from the stage entirely. He understood that spirituality does not need to become a performance for other people. The ego wants an audience. Humility does not. True faith is often lived in the quiet places, unseen, unapplauded, and no less real for it. The 7th truth reaches toward the greatest danger of all. In the final temptation, the devil offered the kingdoms of the world, all their splendor, all their power laid at Jesus' feet. And here we see the ego's ultimate ambition, the moment when power itself becomes the goal, the thing we bow before. Jesus refused to worship it. He chose faithfulness over dominion, obedience over control. And in that refusal lies a warning that echoes into our own lives. A person can gain the whole world of influence and still lose the very self they were trying to elevate. True victory sometimes means refusing the exact things the world tells us to chase with all our strength. The eighth truth is perhaps the most surprising of all, because when we look closely, Jesus' entire triumph comes through a single, quiet word: no. He does not conquer temptation by seizing more. He does not overpower the darkness by becoming greater than it. He wins by refusing. No to excess, no to ego, no to spectacle, no to domination. In a world that measures strength by how much we can take and hold and command, this is a startling reversal. Sometimes the greatest expression of strength is not the ability to grasp, but the ability to let go. Sometimes the most powerful thing a soul can say is simply, no, not this. The ninth truth asks us to rethink what strength even means. Our culture so often ties power to dominance, to the loudest voice, the firmest grip, the one who bends others to his will. But Jesus offers us another picture entirely. His strength appears in self-control, in patience, in the willingness to sacrifice, in obedience, in humble service to others. These are not the traits we usually call powerful, and yet they held firm where power built on pride would have crumbled. Humility, we learn, does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means refusing to make yourself the center of everything, and finding a deeper freedom in that release. And now we arrive at the 10th truth, the one that gathers all the others into a single, luminous revelation. Look back over each temptation, and you will see a pattern beneath them all. Everyone appealed to the same three things: what you want, what you can prove, what you can control. And every single time, Jesus turned his gaze elsewhere, toward God, toward purpose, toward faithfulness. This is the heart of everything. Jesus did not overcome temptation by becoming more powerful than the ego. He overcame it by refusing to let the ego become the master of his actions. He did not defeat the self by feeding it or crushing it. He simply stopped bowing to it. And in that quiet refusal, everything changed. These 10 truths are not relics sealed away in ancient desert 2,000 years ago. They belong to the wilderness. Each of us still walks through today, the silent, invisible one that follows us into every ordinary morning. For the desert did not disappear when the story ended. It only changed its shape, and it is waiting for us there in the noise and the longing of our modern lives. Think of the voice that whispers each time you scroll past someone's polished life, urging you to prove you matter too. Think of the pull to seize more, to be admired, to hold control just a little tighter. That same wilderness stretches out before us, quiet and relentless, asking the very questions Jesus once faced beneath that ancient, empty sky. Look closely at the temptations Jesus faced, and you will see they never really vanished. They only put on modern clothes. The stone that began to become bread now appears as the endless craving for instant gratification. The demand that comfort arrive immediately and without cost. The invitation to leap from the temple, to prove himself through spectacle, now lives in the glowing screen that asks us to perform our lives for an audience, to chase validation one notification at a time. And the offer of all the kingdoms of the world, that ancient bid for power, now echoes in our hunger for fame, for wealth, for status, for the quiet thrill of controlling others and always being right. We compare ourselves without ceasing. We ache to be admired. And beneath it all runs the oldest fear of them all, the terror of being insignificant, of passing through this world unnoticed. So we return to the question we asked at the very beginning. How did Jesus triumph over the ego and the devil? The answer, when we gather all 10 truths together, is quieter than we expected. He knew who he was, so he did not need the world to tell him. He refused to let external validation define him. He placed purpose above pleasure, principle above power, and the voice of Scripture above the clamor of his own hunger. He practiced the slow, unglamorous discipline of self-control, and above everything he placed God above the self. That was the whole of his victory, not force, not spectacle, just the steady refusal to make himself the center of all things. And here we arrive at the heart of it. The ego is not evil in itself. It becomes dangerous only when the self quietly crowns itself the ultimate authority, the final judge of what is true and what is owed. Jesus reveals a different kind of freedom. Freedom, it turns out, does not come from satisfying every desire that rises within us. It comes from the astonishing ability to look at a craving squarely and say, "I do not have to obey this." That single sentence is a kind of liberation the world rarely speaks of. This is why the story has never faded. It has shaped theology and philosophy, inspired centuries of literature and art, and quietly echoed through the halls of modern psychology. Yet its lasting message is remarkably simple. A person is not defined by every thought, every desire, every temptation that drifts across the mind. Those things will always come. The real question is which of them you will choose to obey. And so the wilderness turns inward, and it becomes yours. The desert is no longer a place on a map 2,000 years away. It is the space inside you, where the same voices still whisper. Prove yourself, take more, become powerful, make them see you, and you stand there as he once stood, with the freedom to answer. So ask yourself honestly, in the silence of your own wilderness, which desires will you refuse to obey? Which whispers will you finally stop bowing to? Because in the end, the greatest battle of your life may not be against the world outside you at all. It may be against the part of you that endlessly demands recognition, pleasure, power, and control. And perhaps this is the truth Jesus left waiting for each of us in the sand. That sometimes the greatest victory is not conquering the world, but refusing to let the ego conquer you. Sit with that thought for a moment before you scroll away. Look back over the 10 lessons we walked through together, and let one of them find you. Maybe it was the quiet power of saying no. Maybe it was the idea that humility is not weakness, but a refusal to make yourself the center of everything. I would love to know which one surprised you the most, so tell me in the comments below. Speak it plainly, the way Jesus answered in the desert, without spectacle, and without needing anyone to be impressed. And as you go back out into your own noisy world, carry this with you. The kingdoms will keep caling. The mirrors will keep asking you to prove your worth. But you have Sen, now that there is another way to stand. You can hear the whisper, felt its pull, and still chose not to bow. That is not defeat. That is the truest freedom a person can know.